There is a certain kind of woman who walks into a room and changes its temperature. Not because of beauty, status, or charm in the usual sense, but because of something deeper, something rooted, something eternal. This kind of woman is not loud, but she is heard. She is not young, but she is radiant. She does not seek to be noticed, but somehow no one can look away. What is this presence? What is this invisible magnetism? It is the echo of maturity. It is the fragrance of wholeness. And it is built, not born. Tonight, I want to speak to you about 6 habits, 6 inner movements that make a mature woman irresistibly powerful, not in the way that flatters the ego, but in the way that awakens souls. The first habit is perhaps the hardest and the most beautiful. It does not shimmer on the surface. It does not lend itself to applause or easy admiration. It is invisible to those who seek glamour, but luminous to those who seek truth. A mature woman has made peace with the parts of herself that once frightened her. She no longer flees from her inner darkness, nor does she wage war against it. Instead, she has learned to sit with it, quietly, courageously. She has looked into the mirror and not turned away when it showed her the anger, the grief, the jealousy, the shame. She has stared into the wounded face of her younger self and said, "Come home." This is no small act. To reconcile with the shadow is to undo years, sometimes decades, of pretending, pleasing, performing. It is to stop running. It is to call your own soul back from exile. When a woman is young, she is often taught to be good, to be nice, to smile even when she wants to scream, to comply. She learns that rage is dangerous, that desire is shameful, that sadness makes her weak, and so she begins to bury these things. She hides her disappointments beneath politeness. She swallows her truth until even she can no longer taste it. But buried things do not die. They wait. They wait in dreams, in triggers, in breakdowns and burnouts. They wait in the tightness of her chest when she says yes but means no. They wait in the bitterness that creeps into her voice when she speaks of her past. To become whole, she must unearth them. I once knew a woman named Maya. In her youth, she was the model daughter, responsible, obedient, polished, but beneath her perfection lived a quiet rage. Her mother, though loving in some ways, was critical and dismissive in others. Maya never felt truly seen, but instead of expressing that pain, she turned it inward. She became high-achieving but hard, accomplished but closed. Her friendships were shallow, her relationships ended in silence or flames. It wasn't until her early 60s that she began the slow and sacred work of turning inward. She started therapy, not because of a crisis, but because she felt something was missing. Her body was aging, but her inner life felt incomplete. During this time, she began writing letters to her mother, letters she would never send, letters where she allowed herself to be angry, heartbroken, honest. She cried for the girl she had once been, so eager to be loved, so afraid to be herself, and through those tears something softened in her. The ice around her heart began to thaw. She began speaking more slowly, listening more fully. Her laughter changed. It no longer sounded like performance, but like freedom. People around her started to notice. There was something about her that made others feel safe. Not because she had all the answers, but because she was no longer afraid of the questions. This is the alchemy of the shadow. When we deny it, it controls us, but when we integrate it, it becomes our ally. A woman who has reconciled with her shadow does not need to pretend. She is no longer afraid of her own depth. She can hold both joy and sorrow without breaking. She can love without losing herself. She can disagree without needing to dominate or disappear. Her presence carries weight, Not the heaviness of unspoken pain, but the groundedness of someone who has walked through fire and come out gold. This is what makes her irresistible. Not perfection, not charm, but truth, realness, humanity. She does not hide her scars. She wears them like symbols of survival. She does not shrink to fit in, nor does she shout to stand out. She simply is, and in a world addicted to masks, that kind of honesty is magnetic. She understands now that to be whole is not to be spotless, it is to be complete. To embrace the shadow is to reclaim the pieces of your soul you once abandoned. It is to recognize that even the parts of you shaped by fear or failure are worthy of compassion. It is to say, this too is me. And when a woman says that, with her eyes clear and her voice steady, the world leans in. In a world that thrives on noise and speed, there is something deeply compelling about a woman who chooses stillness, who refuses to be seduced by chaos. We live in a time where drama is mistaken for vitality, where raised voices and sharp words are seen as strength, and gossip is dressed up as connection. Emotional explosions are often glorified as passion, and theatrical outbursts are misread as authenticity. But the mature woman has seen through this illusion. She knows that true power does not shout, it does not demand to be seen, it is not concerned with performance. True power rests quietly in the soul, and speaks only when it has something real to say. There is a kind of woman who once found herself addicted to the adrenaline of conflict. She rushed into conversations with the heat of her feelings, thinking that to be loud was to be heard and to be intense was to be alive. Perhaps she surrounded herself with people who mirrored that same frantic energy. Friends who fed off gossip, who lived for the next drama, who confused emotional chaos with closeness, and for a time it felt like connection. But over the years, the woman began to feel hollow. The highs no longer thrilled her, the arguments no longer stirred anything but fatigue. The laughter that once came easily now rang empty in her ears. She realized, slowly and painfully, that she had been feeding a part of herself that only grew more starved with each bite. It is not an easy thing to leave the stage when the lights are still on, but that is exactly what she did. The mature woman steps back, not because she is afraid of conflict, but because she knows the price of staying in the wrong theater. She no longer wastes her breath on conversations that go nowhere. She does not entertain the petty or the performative. She recognizes the difference between attention and intimacy, and she chooses the latter, even if it means fewer people understand her. She becomes selective with her energy. She begins to crave solitude over spectacle. Instead of gossiping, she starts reading. Instead of proving her point, she starts asking deeper questions. She no longer needs to dominate a room, she simply fills it with her presence. Her silence becomes more potent than someone else's shouting. She begins to speak, not to be heard, but to say something worth remembering. Her words are few, but they are deliberate, like the ringing of a bell that cuts through the fog. This shift does not happen overnight. It often comes after heartbreak, betrayal, or a series of disappointments that reveal the hollowness of the surface world. It comes after watching people come and go, some drawn to her spark, others afraid of her fears the solitude that follows authenticity. She has realized that drama may fill the room, but it never fills the heart. There is profound power in a woman who, in the heat of an argument, chooses to pause, not because she is unsure of herself, but because she has mastered herself. In that moment of silence, she examines her own reactions. She asks, what part of me feels threatened, rather than launching an attack? She doesn't need to win, she wants to understand. And that desire for understanding over victory is what sets her apart. That is not apathy, that is mastery. The world is filled with noise, opinions shouted across social media, headlines designed to provoke, conversations that skim the surface and never dive. But she moves differently. She listens more than she speaks. She reflects before she reacts. She seeks to know rather than to be known. This is not because she is passive. It is because she understands that true connection requires depth, and depth cannot be found in drama. You will not always see her in the center of the room. You may not even notice her at first. But when she does speak, the room falls silent. Not out of fear, but because her voice carries the weight of someone who knows herself. She does not waste her breath. She does not trade her peace for attention. She has something more enduring than popularity. She has presence. And presence, when it is rooted in inner depth, is far more captivating than any performance ever could be. There is something quietly commanding about a woman who knows where she ends and where others begin. Not in theory, not in words alone, but in her very being. She does not explain it, she does not perform it, she lives it. You feel it in her presence before she ever opens her mouth. There is no need to defend, no need to overcompensate. Her clarity speaks for itself. This woman has come to understand that her boundaries are not about keeping others out, they are about keeping herself intact. Many women grow up absorbing the idea that to be loved they must be agreeable, that to be chosen they must bend, that to be safe they must shrink themselves, smooth their edges, make room for everyone but themselves. They learn to equate sacrifice with virtue and silence with peace. But the truth is that peace built on self-erasure is not peace at all. It is a slow and silent suffering. The mature woman has outgrown this illusion. She no longer trades her well-being for belonging. She no longer makes herself small so others can feel big. She no longer says yes when her soul means no. There is no arrogance in this, no bitterness, only deep respect for herself and for others. When she says no, she does not over-explain or apologize. Her no is not cruel, it is clear. It is not a rejection of the other, but an affirmation of herself. And when she says yes, it is wholehearted. It is given freely, without resentment, without hesitation. Because she knows that a forced yes is far more damaging than an honest no. She has learnt that boundaries are not weapons. They are not about control or punishment. They are about truth. They say, "This is who I am. This is what I value. This is what I will allow into my sacred space." They are not rigid walls that shut the world out. They are gates that open only to what honors the self. And these boundaries are not always spoken aloud. They are woven into her body language, her energy, her gaze. You can see them in the way she holds her spine straight when someone tries to cross a line. You can feel them in the pause before she responds to a demand that would deplete her. You can sense them in the way she quietly walks away from relationships that no longer honor her growth, without drama, without spectacle, without need for revenge. She does not chase closure. She is her own closure. The world may not always understand her. Some may call her distant. Some may call her difficult. But she does not live according to other people's interpretations. She has stopped needing to be understood by those who refuse to meet her in truth. And this very refusal to compromise her essence becomes her power. There is research that confirms what wisdom has long known. Individuals with clear personal boundaries report lower levels of stress, better emotional health, and more fulfilling relationships. This is not because life suddenly becomes easy or frictionless. It is because these individuals no longer leak energy. They are no longer tangled in constant guilt or confusion. They are anchored. They are whole. And so she becomes her own source of stability. She no longer waits for others to tell her how to feel, how to move, what is acceptable. She does not outsource her self-worth. She protects her inner life the way a gardener protects fertile soil. Not with barbed wire, but with care. She knows that whatever she cultivates within her depends on the quality of what she allows in. Her presence is not cold, it is sacred. There is a softness in her, but it is not weakness. It is the softness of someone who no longer fears being alone, who has sat with herself long enough to know what she deserves, and who is willing to walk away from what disrupts her alignment, even if it means walking alone. To witness such a woman is to be reminded of something ancient and undeniable, that there is nothing more magnetic than a person who belongs fully to themselves. She does not beg to be chosen. She chooses herself, again and again, with every boundary she embodies, with every line she holds, not in anger, but in love. There comes a time in a woman's life when she no longer seeks to conquer her body, but to come home to it, not to tame it, reshape it, or silence its needs, but to listen, deeply, reverently, like one listens to a sacred drumbeat echoing from the earth. The mature woman no longer wages war against the mirror. She no longer sees her body as an object to be judged or improved upon, but as a living, breathing vessel through which she experiences life itself. She understands now, this body is not a problem to solve. It is a temple to honor. In her youth, perhaps she was taught to measure her worth in inches, pounds, and stares. She may have learned early to apologize for her softness, to shrink into jeans too tight for comfort, to keep her arms hidden, to dread the changing seasons of her form. Maybe she spent years in quiet battle, counting calories instead of blessings, shaming herself in fitting rooms, chasing youth as if aging were a personal failure. She may have danced in front of others' eyes, but never for her own joy. But time has whispered a different truth to her. Slowly, steadily, it has invited her to see her body not as a project, but as a companion, a keeper of stories, a record of survival. The stretch marks speak of birth or transformation. The scars tell of healing. The lines around her eyes map out laughter and heartbreak. The softness of her belly holds the tenderness of a life lived with feeling. She no longer wishes these things away, she cherishes them. And so her habits change, not out of fear, but out of reverence. She moves not to burn away what she hates, but to strengthen what she loves. A walk at sunrise becomes her prayer, a quiet stretch before bed an act of devotion. Her food is no longer a battleground, it is medicine, celebration, communion. She eats when she is hungry, rests when she is tired, and refuses to let guilt interrupt these most basic expressions of self-respect. There is nothing more magnetic than a woman who feels at home in her body. Her confidence does not demand attention, it emanates from her like warmth from a fire. She does not walk into a room asking, "Do I look good enough?" She walks in asking, "Do I feel like myself?" That distinction changes everything. It shifts the energy from performance to presence, and presence, real presence, draws people in without effort. Picture her, a woman in her 50s, dancing barefoot at a wedding, her hair silvering, her laughter rising from her belly like a song. She is not performing youth. She is embodying life. There is no shame in her movements, no self-conscious tugging at her dress, no quick glance to see who is watching. She is not dancing to be seen. She is dancing because something in her soul said yes. Her thighs move with power, her feet move with memory, and her heart beats in rhythm with something much older than fashion or approval. That, right there, is what makes her irresistible. What we long for is not flawlessness. We do not fall in love with perfection. We fall in love with aliveness, with someone who is fully here, fully in her breath, her skin, her sensations. A woman who is not trying to transcend her body, but to inhabit it. That is rare. That is sacred. She knows now that the body is not separate from the soul, that how we treat our physical form reflects how we treat our inner life. If we punish the body, we punish the very vessel that carries our spirit through this world. But when we care for it, when we listen to it and honor it, we build a life of integrity. We become aligned, whole. This woman has no need to keep up. She is not in competition with youth, or with other women, or even with her former self. She is rooted in the present moment. She wears what she loves. She walks with grace that comes not from lessons, but from self-acceptance. Her allure is not something applied from the outside. It rises from within. It is the light in her eyes, the ease in her movements, the truth in her being. In this culture, where women are so often taught to disappear under makeup, filters, and forced smiles, such a woman is revolutionary. She does not disappear. She arrives. And when she does, the world cannot help but take notice. Not because she is perfect, but because she is fully alive. There comes a stage in a woman's life when she no longer seeks to manipulate outcomes or measure her worth by applause. She does not calculate her steps to stay liked, nor does she perform roles to fit in. Instead, she is led by something far older, far deeper. Her soul. This is not a path of strategy or scheming, but of alignment. While the world around her chases influence through metrics and branding, she turns inward, guided by intuition, meaning, and truth. Her compass is not the latest trend or opinion. It is the quiet but insistent voice that lives in the depths of her being. When she was younger, she may have relied on tactics. She may have spent years learning how to navigate rooms, saying what others wanted to hear, dressing the part, following the rules that promised approval. She knew how to win attention, how to gather accolades, how to become what others expected. But somewhere along the way, something inside her began to ache. The performances, no matter how skillful, began to feel hollow. She could be praised and still feel unseen. She could be celebrated and still feel lost, and so she began to ask different questions. Not what do they want from me, but what wants to be expressed through me. This shift was not sudden. It was slow like dawn. She began to trust the pull toward certain projects, certain people, certain kinds of silence. She stopped chasing roles that others defined and began to shape her days around what felt real. Instead of networking, she started mentoring. Instead of proving herself, she began creating from a place of deep connection. She wrote not to impress, but to tell the truth. She showed up not to be praised, but to serve something larger than her own name. Strategy is clever, yes. It can win games, close deals, attract attention, but it cannot touch the soul. It cannot make someone feel seen or held or remembered, and it cannot bring peace. She began to notice that when she led from the soul, the right doors opened without force. The right people found her. The right moments unfolded not through control but through surrender. There was power in that. Not power over others, but power rooted in essence. The kind of power that whispers instead of shouts, and still turns heads. Think of the woman who chooses to build a community garden in her neighborhood. Not for recognition, but because something inside her says, yes, this matters. Think of the woman who sits beside a grieving friend, not offering advice, not trying to fix the pain, but simply being there, present, unafraid, with a listening heart. Think of the woman who finally writes her story after years of silence, not knowing if anyone will read it, but knowing that she must write it anyway. This is the soul in action, and when we encounter such a woman, we feel it. She does not demand our attention, she earns our trust simply by being real. There is no script for living this way, it requires courage. The soul is not concerned with safety or status. It does not fit into timelines or marketing plans. Sometimes it asks us to leave what is comfortable, Sometimes it asks us to speak hard truths. Sometimes it asks us to begin again. But the mature woman has come to know that what is real cannot be lost, that when she follows her soul, she may lose approval, but she gains herself. And in gaining herself, she becomes a mirror for others. People follow her, not because she commands them to, but because in her presence they feel something stir, something long forgotten, something sacred. They remember who they were before the world told them who to be. They remember their own dreams, their own calling, their own voice. She does not preach, she does not posture. She simply lives with such integrity that others feel permission to do the same. This is the quiet revolution of a woman who leads from soul. She creates from the inside out. She defines success not by how wide her reach is, but by how true her path feels. Her legacy is not carved in stone or shouted from stages, but planted in hearts. She may never be the loudest in the room, but she will be the one we remember, not for her strategy, but for her spirit. So what makes a mature woman irresistible? It is not her hair, her smile, or even her intelligence. It is her integration, her in alignment, her depth, her truth, a sacred fire. These 6 habits are not rules, they are invitations. They invite you to return to yourself. And when a woman returns to herself completely and without apology, she becomes a lighthouse in a world drowning in confusion. So if you wish to be irresistible, don't look outward, go inward. That's where the real magic lives.